Hi, this is the Drupal Core Cross Initiatives meeting for 2018, October 25. We have a whole bunch of initiatives represented. So let's start in the regular alphabetical order we have. I don't believe we have people from admin UI or JavaScript modernization, do we? No, I know there's a whole bunch of discussions there. I don't know if Angie wants to represent those discussions or tell us anything about those.
Oops, I'm hearing an echo. Is that me? Okay. So we've been kind of going back and forth on what we're building here. So, initially there was an admin UI initiative that was announced as part of the Nashville thing that was initially intended just to be kind of a light reskin of the 7 theme, just to kind of like give it a fresh dusting of paint or whatever. But the volunteers who got involved in that quickly kind of, when they were doing research on admin experiences, kind of came to the conclusion that people really want more than just a light dusting of paint. They really want a focus on the content creator experience and the authoring experience to be better. And so Christina and Suzanne and some other merry band of folk kind of got together, did some user surveys, did some wireframing, this kind of thing, or kind of arriving at an interface that looked similar to, say, like WordPress Gutenberg or Squarespace or Google Sites, or a lot of these different authoring tools that are kind of heading in the direction of, kind of like what you see is what you get. The whole page is a canvas, and you can move things around, and you can add arbitrary bits of data here and there and everywhere, and this kind of thing. So that's kind of like where they were headed, and still are headed in a way. But the team responsible for implementing this was pushing back quite a lot about this direction because, for a lot of different reasons. But one is, if you're going to do an interface like that, most of those interfaces, and in fact, all of those interfaces, I think, more or less end up with like a squashed up string of HTML as your output for that, which kind of works actively against Drupal's strength as a structured content data yaka thing. It also, like, representing the a live preview of what the site's going to look like is really difficult when you don't know what the site is going to look like. Like, you can provide a preview of what it's going to look like on the tool that you're authoring it on, for example, like a website on a desktop browser or on a mobile phone or this kind of thing. But, if you're viewing on Apple Watch, or you've got a decoupled front end that runs completely separately from the back end, it doesn't work at all for that. And so there was some back and forth going on between, whether we should, instead maybe try and do a front end agnostic preview, which would be kind of similar to what we had in Drupal 7, where the preview showed up in the admin theme instead of the front end theme. But we've done a lot of usability research on that. We know people get very confused and they don't understand what's happening. And so we're going back and forth and around in circles on this general idea. And like, should we do like the raw form and then a slide outy panel that shows a preview, or like, how should we handle this? So I kind of like, we've been kind of touching on these same topics for like ever since Drupal Europe or even before. So I kind of looped in the other Drupal product managers. Jeff Eaton is also involved in that, and he really wants to approach this from like a content strategy point of view. So he wants to kind of assemble a panel of awesomeness of other content strategists in the industry that have worked extensively with other CMSs and might have some good ideas here. So the long and the short of that is the team working on sort of the next gen designs as far as the admin UI goes are kind of put on hold temporarily, while we sort of like do a bit more research and get some more ducks in a row. And so in the meantime, what the team is going to be focusing on is the prototype that they created for Drupal Europe was more or less the existing content authoring experience plus some extra stuff, like drag and drop file uploads, and I think there's some auto saving and stuff like that, but kind of honing in on excuse me, that experience to make that a little bit nicer, because that's something we know we can improve regardless of what this, you know, kind of next generation pivot thing is. And then we can talk to more users, talk to more experts in the field, and try and get a firm handle on what it is that we want to build, like in the future, reaching like the Drupal 9 age or so. So I think that is an accurate summary of everything that got talked about. Gabor, if you remember things other than I did, feel free to speak up, but I think that that's a decent rundown. So the 7 refresh is still a good idea. Still would love to see people taking that on. But at the moment, there's nobody signed up to lead that as far as I know. Oh, and I guess one other thing from that initiative is Bad Camp is happening right now. And I know Sally and Daniel and maybe some other people are there. And what they're sprinting on is exploring extension points with the existing API so that, you know, like a node form can, you know, have module. Whoa, I don't want the camera on. Hi. The modules can kind of add their own data into the node form dynamically. So like field widgets and something like path auto module and that kind of thing. So they're trying to explore what sorts of extension points make sense to offer as part of the React application and how modules would go about adding their stuff to it. So that's also a thing that's happening right now in that initiative. And that's it for me.
That's some progress. At least we are figuring out some challenges. I think there was supposed to be somebody working on the 7 refresh. Did that person step back, or I don't know?
Oh, well, that would be great. I wasn't sure if that was handled or not, but if that's already been handled as of before my knowledge, that's great.
All right, I will try to follow up on that, because at least that, I mean, that's a thing that was universally understood to be useful, and is not contested in terms of, I mean, it's still the same admin experience, it's just more modern looking. So
exactly, and they've done a really good job with it. I know there's a lot of people who offered to do work on it. I just I didn't know we had anyone in line to like coordinate efforts on it.
All right, I will see what I can figure out on that front.
Okay, great.
Cool. Anybody from API first?
Yeah. So, sorry, get my bearings here. Last time we talked, we had just cut a beta 2. And yesterday we released an RC1. So we're not going to do any commits except for critical bug fixes. We tried to make a really big push. Wim wrote a blog post. We sent out a bunch of tweets. Some of you guys retweeted that, which was helpful. We want to see basically as much usage as we can of the RC before we cut a stable. I don't really know how long we're going to wait to see how that goes, but that's what we're doing. We were waiting because we wanted JSON API extras, decoupled router, kind of the satellite modules to be compatible, and we managed to make that happen. We're still working on revision stuff. I see a couple people from, I think, the content moderation initiative here. I'll post a link in chat, but we're trying to support read-only support for revisions in JSON API, including content moderation. I think we've gotten it pretty well, but one of the things we ran into was there's really no like standardized access mechanisms. So to figure out, you know, is a user allowed to view a revision of this type, or something like that. Like, how does that play with like the view label operation on past revisions? So we tried to just lock it down to core. We said, you know, we're not going to accept any revisionable entity. We're just going to do node, block content, and media. And then we tried to derive what the access controls ought to be. according to everything we could find. But if somebody from the Content Moderation Initiative could take a look at that and make sure that we're not missing, any access controls that we just don't know exist, that would be super helpful. Other things we're working on, WIM is pushing on file upload support. We already have that in REST and Core, and we're kind of porting that to JSON API and extracting the shared bits. Yeah, that's it.
Do you have an issue number for the revision support now that Andre's here?
Yes,
I
I
guess.
posted it in Hangouts.
Oh, you did.
So to chime in a bit here, I did take a look at that issue briefly, but I have to bring myself up to speed with everything that's happening in this area. I mean, so far the workflow initiative has been focused more on the storage part of revisions, but I started working my way through all the other parts which are needed, like permission and access control. But I can talk about that more at the end.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm aware of the issue, and I will take a deeper look at it once I have more knowledge of what needs to be done on this part.
If you ever want to maybe pair program or just get on a call and walk through stuff, let me know. It might make things better.
Yeah, sure.
Andre, do you want to go next with workflow since you're up anyway?
Yeah, okay. So I'm not sure what we discussed last week, but as a short overview, the new entity update API patch is ready to be reviewed. All the conversions for taxonomy terms and menu links are also have patches which are ready to be reviewed with tests and everything. And like I said earlier, I've started working on the whole access control part, starting with the permission providers. That is something that other folks already worked on in the contrib entity module, and we're trying to bring that into core. So right now, I'm just trying to get the core patch ready for the permission providers. Then after that, I'll take a look at the entity access handler using this generic permission provider. And after that comes the revision parts of both of these aspects. So I would say maybe until next week, I should have a very good overview of what's needed for JSON API. What I'm trying to do there is provide some generic methods and generic permission provider, which can be implemented by every core entity type. And all the access control handlers will just have an easier way to get the proper permission name for various operations. For example, view, update, delete, create. Right now, all core entity types provide their own permission names, and it's hard to it's how to put this. It's hard for a module that wants to work with all entity types in the same way. That, I mean, the fact that they don't know the permission names of each provided by each entity type. So that's what I'm trying to standardize now. And after this is done, access controls should be very easy to figure out.
Is there an issue for that?
Yeah, I can. It's something that you and Wim already worked on a bit. I'm trying to restart that work.
Cool, thank you.
And I'm splitting it in two parts. First, the permission provider, and then the access control.
Cool.
And after these are done, the revision parts for both. Did I mention path aliases? No, I guess I didn't. So also since last week, we have a patch ready that converts path aliases to entities, and it's all working fine with full backwards compatibility in place. So this also needs review, and there are a lot of follow-ups for things that we can improve in the path alias subsystem. One of them being, I think the most important one is that we want to convert the custom path field type in core to a regular entity reference field. So that will make it, that will standardize the way we interact with path aliases across entity types. That will impact the API first initiative a bit, because right now there are custom normalizers and serializers, I guess, for that path field type. So we'll have to figure out how to provide a BC layer, backwards compatibility layer. But yeah, this is another area that we are actively working on right now.
Yeah, the two of you need to coordinate. Yeah. Can you paste the link for the path alias one? Because I've seen it go by in contribute Slack, but I did not note it.
Just a minute.
Yeah.
This is the issue for the conversion. And then there's the Is there another meta issue, a plan for all the other work which will be enabled by this conversion, including the conversion of the path field type to an entity reference field?
Yeah, publishing status. I guess you can have path aliases for unpublished entities and stuff.
Yes. Yeah. I didn't include that in the conversion tip because I think it requires separate discussion.
Fun times.
Yes.
Same for migrations, so I guess
Migrations are already working fine right now because we have a full BC layer in place.
Oh.
Of course, we can always update the migration and swap the custom destination that it's using to a regular entity destination.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The migration still works right now. When it's tested, it's a good indication of that we're not breaking any current APIs.
Yeah, so that's not the immediate need then.
No.
Right.
I think that's about it for the workflow initiative. Yeah, a lot of overlap with API first, at least for now, because they are starting working on the revision parts a lot, and while the storage is in a pretty good shape, all the other parts related to revisions are not yet in such a good shape. But yeah, we'll get there.
Any other things that people here can help you?
Well, the patches I mentioned, the entity upgrade API, the version of path aliases, they all need a lot of reviews, I guess.
Yeah, Francesco said that he will get back to reviewing the API for converting entities as soon as possible.
Okay, that's nice.
So we'll see when that happens. We did not yet have.
We're not blocked on either of these, so it's not a rush. I mean, we can do all the work in parallel here, at least for now.
Right. Sam, do you have anything to add to that?
I actually pinged Ted and Tim earlier this week about some layout builder stuff, which kind of intersected with content moderation. So I don't mind waiting until those guys want to go.
All right, we can do that next. We can do layout next. Why not?
Okay. I have been following some issues, which is just the general layout builder content moderation integration issues. So there's a lot of discussion in there right now with exactly how that's going to work. So I was just following up. I thought this might be a good call to discuss those issues and just see if we could sort of come up with a path forward on at least like a direction for how layout builder and content moderation are going to play nicely together. So I don't know if Ted or Tim has had a chance to review those issues or the latest comments in either of those.
Yep. Yeah, I've been tracking them really closely. And I looked at your example sandbox and your YouTube video and the whole thing. For everyone else, the short story is that the ability to load the correct revision for whatever the correct means is only really possible right now if you happen to use entity forms. If you just try to do it yourself, there's no API for it, and you'd have to copy paste the code out of whatever derives it in the entity form to make the same determination. So therefore, because layout builder UI isn't a form, it's not loading the correct revision. So my suggestion was we should write an API to be able to get the right revision and decouple that from entity forms, which, as far as I know, like REST would need as well. The other shorter term solution is just cheat and make layout builder UI secretly use entity form just to get the correct revision, which to me sounds like not the most correct way of doing things, even though it sandbox proves that it works. But I was in a discussion with Ted this morning, and he pointed out there's an extra benefit to making it a form, which is also in Sam's video, which is that you then get the revision message field, even though it kind of breaks the whole idea that the layout builder UI shows you exactly what you're going to see on the front end with no additional elements. It would then just tack on this revision description, log description, whatever text area at the bottom with a save button. And then other modules could add their own widgets onto the thing. I'm kind of worried about that being abused because the whole idea was that layout builder would only be responsible for changing its data, and the rest of the data of the entity wouldn't be manipulable. And we have no way of preventing, if we switch to this new way, we have no way of preventing people from just putting whatever field widgets they want in the layout builder UI. So it's kind of a can of worms there, but I don't really know what the best way forward is from there.
What's the scenario you're worried about there? That people are going to do what exactly?
I don't fucking know. I mean, it's not really worry. I mean, like if someone's stupid enough to put the body field widget on the layout builder UI, so they can change the body text as they place the body text, but in 2 different parts of the page, and like just make the whole thing confusing and bad. That's their problem in one way. You know, we can't stop them from doing that. Right now, they can't do that at all.
If core sets the pattern to be like add fields to the layout builder, add field widgets, then contrib would, I guess, rightly think it's the right pattern. So it becomes not as much a preview tool because you have widgets on it. So you're not previewing the entity as it is laid out. It's like the administration part of the layout builder is the same as the, or is sort of built on the presentation part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So if core doesn't do that, I mean, I think one thing we could do is somehow like not just show that part. Maybe, you know, maybe it shows up in the side part. Maybe it is something that you only see once you save it, or something like that. I mean, so that when you,
there's a lot more UI and UX work specifically that needs to be done with this. If we go this way, it also really kind of dovetails with a lot of the stuff I've seen from Christina with regard to sort of putting meta information in like a off-canvas toolbar, and sort of making the difference between editing the metadata for the thing and the content of the thing and the layout for the thing different modes, like form modes that you can switch between quickly. So in that future, this makes a little bit more sense. But I just originally was pushing back really hard because it's a cop-out for the fact that we don't have an API. And that kind of bothers me.
Yeah, so I'm wondering.
I completely agree with the revision stuff. So I think that work should happen anyway, regardless. I think the main motivation is, unless you provide a way for the user to choose the state of the revision where that layout is saved, then content moderation integration doesn't really work, even if they're loading the correct revision. For example, if you've got a published revision and you load the correct revision to edit, which could be the published revision, if you start creating things like inline blocks and moving layout stuff around, without a little widget to say, I want this data to exist in a draft instead of the published revision, there's no way to actually save that content in a pending unpublished revision. So it means your content in that sense always has to be live all the time.
So
that's, wait, sorry, hold on, I need to go back a second there. So you're saying that if with content moderation enabled, and let's say your default, like I'm just using my words here, not like the right ones because I don't know what they are. If you're on a published node and the expectation is that you can't just save the published node again, like it would go to draft or something. If you're saying that if you just load the published node and click save without a form element on the page, it would just update the published one, like that magic is controlled by the form element, not by some underlying mechanism?
Well, it's like there's no set transition or like target state from published. So that's all configurable. Really? So you can choose.
Right. But let's say you configure it so that the target state after published is draft. Is that controlled somewhere lower level, or does that just become like the default value set on the transition widget?
It could be either, right? So it could be published or draft.
Okay.
And it only doesn't change if you don't actually set a value on that field.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So the state won't actually change if you just load and save an entity. So you need some mechanism or
I thought transition
like a
was a little bit more powerful than
that.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Yep. All right. Well, I'm just going to give up and we're going to do forms because it seems like Drupal doesn't work without them. So yeah. Thanks.
Well, you would actually get so Sam, you would actually get a validation, right? If it's a published node and there is no valid transition from published to published.
Yep.
We should not save it because we should get an entity validation. Whether we're using a form or not, we will get an entity validation, right?
Yeah, exactly. So like in that scenario, you just wouldn't be able to save the entity at all. So you essentially couldn't make any layout changes if the entity was being validated and there was no transitions configured.
Yeah, I mean, Tim, that's another reason I think we have to show the wisdom. There'll be a lot of, or there could be a lot of cases where the user has to make a choice. Like it's in a state where there is no valid transition to the current state. So when you save it, you have to choose.
Right. I
between one or
misunderstood
two.
how it worked underneath. I like haven't done really a lot of workflow stuff since Drupal 6. And back then it was like it forcibly changed the state based on whatever the default transition was for you, and there was no interaction necessarily needed. But this is what these calls are for. So thank you.
Yeah. So I had a question for Gabe as far as, so you guys are trying to get revision support for 8.7 when JSON API goes in?
Yeah. I mean,
so how is this? So how is it supposed to work? Like, I mean, because I think it's a similar situation where somebody's making a JSON API GET request, and their intention is that they're going to do the GET request, make some changes, and then do a patch request. But if the entity is in content moderation, the GET, like the standard GET request, is not necessarily going to get you the editable revision. So it's the same problem with layouts. So is there something to say like how would that workflow supposed to work from the client perspective?
Yeah, I mean, that's why we also wanted to get I posted a link in the doc for an API that says we have to have an API for correctly loaded entity, safe for editing. Right now, without the read-only support, we load the default revision. And when you send a patch request, a new revision isn't created. We just update the default revision every time. So if you're using JSON API, you're not really using content moderation or revision. Okay. There is a way that what we're going to do is you can, if you want to get different revisions, there's a query string, and you specify a query string that says resource version equals, and then you could say working copy or latest version, and the latest version is the latest default. And so if you want that editable version, what you're going to have to do is say, give me the working copy, and that will be, as soon as we can provide it, it should be the one that's safe to edit.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
I mean, just touching on the entity form stuff as well, the main motivation for that architecture was just so the work that went into things like the moderation state widget wasn't sort of like re-implemented, right, in some other way. So I suppose if we agree that there has to be like a path forward and like some form control to allow you to change that if we're integrating with content moderation, then I think it's like at least worth exploring as an option. But again, I don't have a lot of the context in the background as well for how that stuff came about.
I mean, it seems like the JSON API give me the working, whatever it's called, the working copy or the editable copy, whatever it is, and the form should both be calling the same API to say, I mean, they both should not have that same logic to determine what the editable entity is, editable revision is.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's that issue for loading a safe revision is definitely should go ahead regardless of any of the outcomes of those integrations.
Okay.
Yeah, one meta thought on that is that, you know, we've made it this far into Drupal without an API to do this pretty low level thing, even though we all need it. And I feel like the only reason I mean, I opened that issue and I only opened it because we needed it in Layout Builder. And as we like continue to work around these things, like if we remove the need, if Layout Builder is no longer blocked on that issue, what's the motivation to actually fix it? Like, how long are we going to then continue further without this API, without someone kicking and screaming and demanding it exist? I don't. It's a really hard problem to solve, and I just don't see I don't see it getting fixed without a need.
Want to chime in a bit here? That's on the roadmap for the workflow initiative for 8.7. So I did some initial. I thought about that. I have posted some initial thoughts on how that should work, and it will come along as part of the revision 3 stuff that's also planned for 8.7. So in that aspect, there's, I mean, I'm very much aware that we need to fix that, and it's on our roadmap for 8.7.
Okay, that's good enough for me. Thanks.
It's just that, like I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of things to do, and you know.
Among all the 10 other major things that need to be done in 8.7.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to do as much parallelism and work as possible, but yeah, the things I mentioned are the things that I started with. They're in this review. When I'm finished with path aliases and the permission and access handlers, the revision trees are up next, basically. So if that helps in any way to ease up any concerns about that specific issue.
Great. Do we have anything else for layouts to talk about that are not revision related?
Yeah, so we have a roadmap in place to get us to stable with a target of doing that for 8.7. And it's not really a written out roadmap as much as it is we have a list of stable blockers that are tagged, and everything on that list is a blocker and everything else isn't. And we have a bunch of people within Acquia and outside Acquia working towards that list. We kind of divvied it up internally at Acquia into which things we're going to focus on which quarter, but all of them are of equal importance. So I guess that's the big news from us, is that we finally have a list. It's been looked over and signed off on by release manager and everything. So
The list in the Hangout chat and in the notes of the meeting. I have the tab open for a while. Cool. Let's go to demo next. Umami, Elliot, are you here?
Sorry, I was on mute. Hi, everyone. Major umami things. We've actually taken our 4 main goals for 8.7 and kind of put each one of the maintainers on point, or initiative leads on point for a specific thing. So I'm going to pick up driving multilingual. Keith is going to look at implementing Tor module. Gaz is on point for media. Mark is on point for layouts. The big thing that's decided on this week's call is that the second language we're going to do for umami is going to be Spanish, based on the fact we had twice as many volunteers show up in where we were deciding it. Hi, Christina. And we used that along with the criteria of how much of the Drupal UI is translated into that language, and Spanish has about 96.6%, so very close to 100, and has over 3 times as many speakers worldwide as the next nearest language that we had offer for, with about 540 million. So now that we have a language, we need to start devising a plan of attack for how we start translating, starting off with, for US English, we ended up evolving a set of standards on how we were going to standardize on measurements and so on and so forth. We need a Spanish version of that before we can actually start translating stuff, or else there'll be nothing to review it against. So we need to get that into motion and find someone to volunteer coordinating that who actually speaks Spanish, which none of the initiative leads do. So yeah,
I will find volunteers, don't worry.
Thank you for being our volunteer. Yeah, and then once we have all that, obviously we don't want to get in the way of the Spanish community approving content and so on, like it gets very bike sheddy with the English stuff. So that's the main takeaway. We did get a load of hopefully low-hanging fruit or accessible stuff tagged up for Badcamp by Amy June, and we pinged a whole load of other stuff at her that she may want to consider adding on, so we might get some traction there. I'm probably not going to be able to achieve too much more over the next couple of weeks as we're running an unconference in Manchester, and that has a lot of my focus. That has the majority of my focus. There's a couple of other things that we could do with some guidance on, mainly around documentation. So the standards document that I mentioned is actually all on an issue where we were initially reviewing all the content, where we evolved those guidelines. We could do with actually moving them to somewhere more official in the documentation system, but I don't know where that would be and who is the gatekeeper of that. Similarly, in terms of documentations, there's a list of all the strategic initiatives for Drupal, and that links to a strategic initiative page for Out of the Box that has no content on at all. So we need to find out how we get access to that. We have a volunteer lined up who used to be a journalist, ready to write content for that. And similarly with the Drupal 8 user guide, it doesn't mention Umami at all, and it would be good to actually start getting maybe some content in the user guide explaining Umami and what it's for somewhere.
So I think for the strategic initiatives page, either Angie or myself can help. I don't think that we can give you, I guess, yeah, I don't know. We may have a system to provide access to directly editing it, but it's a not very efficient penalizer page kind of thing. That's a one-off panel for each section. It's not very efficiently designed, but we didn't have any better to use on Drupal.org.
So if we mock something up in a Google Doc or something and ping that over to you guys, is that the
yeah, we can copy paste it in, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. For the user guide, I don't know who's currently spearheading the editing of that, but Jennifer or Joe used to do that, Jennifer Hodgson or Joe Schindler. So either of them should be possible. We can helping them for you if you don't have a relationship.
I can certainly reach out to Joe.
All right. I think he would be able to help. So you will, and make notes. I'm making notes in the meantime. And for the documentation, I can tell you from the top of my head, but we can certainly take a look. I guess every module is supposed to have a section of its own. I don't know if profiles are supposed to or not. So that would need some more investigation. I don't know if Angie maybe knows better or somebody else with more documentation, knowledge, experience.
Sorry,
Yeah.
what the question was?
Where would the umami docs go on Drupal.org? What's the play? What's the in the structure? Where would it would be logical in the guide?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, everything has like there's a handbook. Hold on. It's not an overly useful handbook because like every module and presumably a distribution could also fit into this, but every module gets its own like documentation page. Is more or less a copy and paste of hook help.
Mm-hmm.
One area. I think it's actually a really good question. It might be worth creating an issue in the documentation issue queue about this because the documentation team is currently in the throes of, kind of like rearranging how the evaluator guide is done and how the getting started guide is done and these sorts of things. And so, excuse me. And I think that's going to touch the user guide in some ways too. So I think it's a totally valid question and is probably best to post to Matthew Grasmick, Jennifer Hodgson, those kinds of people, because I could say my opinions, but I think that that's going to be the best thing to do. So I'd say post a documentation project issue. It's like, how can we talk about umami in the documentation ? And then see how we go from there.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
It'll be in documentation specifically targeted to evaluators because most of the user guide is about people building out their site for the first time, and we explicitly don't want people using umami as a starting point for that.
No, but maybe we should put something there saying that.
Say again. Sorry.
Maybe we should have something in that documentation saying as such.
Yeah, right.
Great. I'll raise that issue. Thank you.
No problem.
So you mentioned that you also have media and layouts in your roadmap. Do you have anything from layouts that the layout people here could help with or take a look or?
Not right now. I'm not sure. I don't think Mark's done that much with it.
All right. So nothing yet.
Is that Mark Conroy?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, he's in the layouts channel every once in a while. So I think I'm up to speed with whatever he's up to.
Brilliant.
Yay. Great.
Awesome sauce.
That would be nice to be in line when layouts get stable and then we already demonstrate it right away. That would be nice.
Yeah.
To not be out of sync. That would be cool. Great. Christina needs to leave. I don't know if Christina, you still have time to look at the admin UI redesign report that Angie gave, and you want to add to that, or?
Yeah, just I didn't know that she already did that. So mostly what she said, I was just going to add that we have already the issue for asking for feedback to the community. It's just that it's taking longer than I thought, and that's the only thing apart from that. So that's all.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Ryan arrived in the meantime. So I guess I will give a very short update on Drupal 9, which will probably lead to Ryan. So we talked about last week that we should have a Drupal 9 section here. So we've had a first Drupal 9 initiatives meeting 2 weeks ago. No, last Monday, basically, not 2 weeks ago. So after our last core initiatives meeting, and we started mapping out all the issues that there are about Drupal 9. And now we have this issue 307-300, which is our master plan for release Drupal 9 in 2020. And that's supposed to be a tree of everything. And we'll see if that's possible to organize that in a way that's discoverable. But it's a tree of everything. And it's currently broken down to 2 timelines. So one timeline is prerequisites to branching Drupal 9 from Drupal 8, which is all the issues that should be done in Drupal 8. preparing for updating dependencies and stopping using deprecated code outside of tests and all kinds of other things. And then there's all the other things that needs to be done in Drupal 9, like updating the dependencies themselves and dropping all the deprecated stuff, etc. Some of that still needs to have issues open. So one of the threads that I was working on recently to figure out is all the dependencies that need updated. So we have currently people working on updating Drupal 8 to be compatible with Symfony 4 and allow Drupal 8 to run with Symfony 4, not require it to run with Symfony 4, but allow it to run with Symfony 4. And then eventually next year, Symfony 5 will be released, and that's before Drupal 9, so we'll need the same done with Symfony 5. And then hopefully Drupal 8 could still be run on Symfony 5 if somebody wants to do that, but it will not require Symfony 5. And then in Drupal 9, we only need to update the composer files to require Symfony 5 and done. And the same happens to Tweak 2. There's work ongoing to do that. And there's work ongoing to get rid of our dependency on Doctrine because they dropped the annotation reader that we need to use. And the annotation reader they support would not be feasible for the amount of annotations we use, the memory consumption, etc. So we need to have our own solution to that. So there's an issue for that as well, and then to decouple from the Symfony CMF and to update PHP unit, etc. So I've been collecting all of these issues. Most of them can be worked on in Drupal 8. And then eventually we hopefully only need to flip the version numbers in Drupal 9. A lot of people working on a lot of those issues. I'm not actually working on the issues themselves. And I also built a tool to generate the issue tree itself so we can visualize it, etc. I will post the updated visual tree on 300.7.300, the master issue, so that people can see the current state and then help expand the issues. So that's it for Drupal 9, I guess. No further stuff. We are planning. We're doing the plan. So Ryan, do you have any updates from any of your sites?
Yes, I just wanted to kind of mention the Composer initiative. We've made really good progress on getting it, getting to the point where we've got a product that actually generates a site when you do a Composer Create project that is identical to the current existing tarball and works. And so there was a lot of like little things we had to kind of clean up and fix each one, and now it's just in the cleanup phase where get these things into a patch into core in a reviewable state. But the hard problems have all been solved, so that's really the main update there. So I'm in the midst of just going and doing a code review / code sniffer fixing for all the stuff that's in the plugin that we're trying to import. And so once that's there, it'll be in one issue. And it's actually kind of reduced the amount of different pieces and moving parts that we have. There's really just now 2 parts, the templates and the scaffolding plugin. So that's also a nice thing that we don't have a variety of plugins to concern ourselves with.
So did you type out the update that's in the doc now?
Yeah, I just put that in there.
All right. Yeah, I see. Great. That's very cool. Do you have anything on the automatic update side of things?
I haven't been paying any attention to that side of things, actually. I may have missed the last meeting.
That's fine.
Yeah.
And you mentioned last time for extended security support that Drupal CI is being updated soon to support that.
Yes, working on adding that extra layer of an extra branch label so that contrib projects can test against the security branch, so that if they inadvertently add features that are only in the newer branches, that they'll know about it.
All right, so that's still coming soon. Cool. All right. I think that concludes both the time that we've had for the meeting and all the people that are here. There's one more thing. Fabian sent a report by chat, which is basically the same as 2 weeks ago. That they agreed on for config management 2.0, the approach for the transformer API, and they need to find time to produce the big patch to move that forward. So they don't have time to work on it, but they know what they want to work on. So that's it for config management. Yeah, cool. Any other topics that people on the call can help with, or we can get core committers look at things for you? Nope. All right. Then in that case, thanks for coming. And I'm glad that we managed to talk about so many cross interests.
Yeah, that was great, actually.
That's why we're here.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Right.
Bye.